Hey everybody, it's Dave here and Darren over there. We're your two old bloggers. Been blogging about the Minnesota Vikings publicly for over 2 decades apiece, and we're here today to talk about them once again because we got news. We have news this week. Yes, we do. Viking season may have ended, and we'll find out. Do you think it's a success or a failure? We've moved on from our defensive coordinator, Ed Donatel. We'll talk about some of the news that's come out as to who the Vikings are looking to interview. And then we will get into drafting better. Kwesi will have to do a good job come the draft this year, which Vikings fans can go to. It's in Kansas City. It's a decent drive, but you could make it so that we can fill some of the perceived holes and get better. Next on Two Old Bloggers. Climb in the Pocket, Daily Norseman, and Lake Monster Brewing presents Two Old Bloggers. Starting now. Hey everybody, Dave here once again. Darren over there in the Great White North. How are things, Darren?
Much better today. I was lying horizontal most yesterday on the bed, some sort of food poisoning or something like that. So that's why we're going on Sunday today instead of Saturday. I just couldn't answer the bell yesterday, but here today. So all's good. How about you, Dave?
Well, we all know it happens at least once in our lives, if you're lucky. Things going great down here in Texas. It's a bit chilly. But other than that, we've had an exciting week of Vikings news, and it's time to get into it. We named this episode the 2022 season, Success, Failure, Gone. We wanted to because those are some of the things we're going to discuss today. Now on to theme one. And as I scroll down, want to thank everybody for joining us today. That includes Julian, Clifford, G-Mac, Davey. I'm hoping to see lovely Miss Mary on. She has not joined yet, but I hope she's here. And anybody else that is watching, because I know you are. I can see the number. There's Mary. Hey, Sean, how you doing? Are you ready to start today? First thing you wanted to talk about, not that one, was success or failure?
Success or failure for both the new head coach, Kevin O'Connell, and then the new GM, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, Dave, it's easy for us to look at, I think, geez, we had a 13-4 season. We're one and done in the playoffs. And, and look at that as being very disappointing and maybe a bit of a failure. And every year, if you don't win the Super Bowl, I guess your season for most teams is a failure, I think. But when these guys got hired last year, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah first, and then Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah selected Kevin O'Connell as the head coach, lots of Vikings fans, we were very excited to see what these two guys would bring, particularly with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and that analytical background that he'd had, and how that might make things, make things different, and how the Vikings go about getting players and assembling the team, and all of that. And I think that overall, first off with Kevin O'Connell, I don't think we can say anything, despite the playoff loss against the Giants last week. I think a huge successful year for Kevin O'Connell. Just taking a team 13-4, first NFC North Division title since 2017. Got that. Gets to the playoffs. He also a guy with an offensive background. We were looking for him to take the offense. Dave, you and I talked about it a lot last year about how we want to see this team be a top 10 offense. Well, at least scoring points wise, they were a top 10 offense, eighth actually in the league in points scored. So mission accomplished there. He was able to get a team that he cultivated a team and a culture that overcame a lot of adversity during games. They won some games that the Vikings did not win in the years previous to that, and particularly in the Mike Zimmer regime. Particularly thinking about that. Yeah, that the Buffalo game on the road against a very good team, and down early in that one, they win that one, and even as surprising as it was the way that game started, to come back and from a 33-0 deficit and win that game against the Colts. Those are games that the Vikings would have not had no business winning in previous years. So a lot of good things there. Yes, he's got stuff to improve on, play calling and short yardage situations, that sort of thing. But everybody's got stuff that they need to improve on. But for me, Kevin O'Connell, definitely successful rookie season for him, no doubt about it. You can pick at things here and there, but overall, he gets 2 thumbs up for me. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, though, go ahead, Dave. It looks like you're gonna.
Well, I was going to say that determining success and failure a lot of times is on point of view, how you view it. Now, we love the stats. We're stats nerds. We love to look at every individual performance. We love to look at box score stats, yards, scoring, etc., and go, well, we did as good or better than last year. We did better, so that's an improvement. That's a success, right? We did the whole, you hinted on culture, the whole idea of, say, Kirk Cousins, though his stats were down, his mentality changed, and mentality and culture are related, that he would take those shots. He would go for that 3-on-1 coverage to Justin Jefferson in the Buffalo game, and we had a chance to get it, and he came down with the greatest catch ever. That's a mentality. That's an improvement. We call that success. There are people, however, that say, no, success is only if you win the Super Bowl. Well, sorry to say, folks, that comes far and few between for every team in the NFL, not just your Minnesota Vikings, who have yet to do it. They're one of a handful of teams that have yet to do it. But even the ones that have won Super Bowls, it's far and few between. One of them plays tonight. Well, 2 of them play tonight when we're talking Dallas and San Francisco. How long has it been since Dallas has won a Super Bowl? It's been a generation.
So let's hope it's much longer.
Yes. Yeah, we don't mind. As Vikings fans, we don't mind. But if you're basing your view on success and failure on winning the Super Bowl, you're going to be disappointed more times than not. And what we're saying is not necessarily to do that, but look at the individual pieces. Look at different things that were improved. Did things get better? Yes, we won more games. That's an improvement, right? Players, Justin Jefferson had over 1,800 yards. That's an improvement of his versus previous season. Were we as efficient moving the ball as the previous season? No. When it comes to stats, no, we weren't. But did it give us more points? Yes, it did. There's things you could look at. And if you start making excuses, well, things weren't perfect. Well, we talked about the fans that think Super Bowl winning is the ultimate success. Well, if you're wanting perfection, I'm sorry, that's a smaller subset than the Super Bowl winning. Because nothing can be perfect all the time, nor can you achieve it when you're talking football, which is a dynamic team sport with you're starting at 90 some odd players in the preseason and you move on throughout the season. There's no way to get perfection. It's impossible. So you've got to take it down as, was it better than the previous year or the previous regime? And there was a lot of things that went into last year that you hit upon that Kevin O'Connell, I think, made it a success. Granted, we'd love to be playing this weekend. We'd love to be moving on to the NFC Championship. We'd love to be playing the Super Bowl and win that. But that's not going to happen. And not this year, obviously, because we got our butts whomped or shouldn't have lost to the Giants last week. So we got to look at it as a whole. And as a whole, I do believe it was a success. Now, what were some of those keys to that success?
Well, I think first off, I wanted to touch on also Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and his first year and how I felt that he and how he performed, and where I think his first year was a bit more of a mixed bag maybe than Kevin O'Connell's. First off, hiring Kevin O'Connell by him, if he was the main guy pushing for that, and we know the Vikings had a bit of a decision making group.
Yes.
There was much collaboration and all of that, and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah talked about that when he joined. But selecting Kevin O'Connell as the Vikings head coach, that was a huge win and successful decision by Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Kevin O'Connell, he's young, he walks, talks, acts like he was born to be a head coach. That seems like after 1 year, early, but it looks like that was a slam dunk success right there. The trade for T.J. Hawkinson, that was a huge win for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. You've got the numbers up there. The guy ended up with over 80 catches, over 900 yards. Some of that was with Detroit, but that might have been the best trade in the NFL this year. And Kwesi Adofo-Mensah made that. He pulled that one off. So that was a huge plus, 2 thumbs up move by Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. But on other moves, his other trades, maybe not so much. Ross Blacklock, the defensive lineman we got from the Texans. Yeah, we only gave up a 6th rounder for him, but he was a flop. Didn't make much of an impact when he did play, and then he was a healthy scratch for the last 5 games in the playoffs. That trade isn't looking too good, even though the compensation we gave up was minimal. The Jalen Reagor trade, where we gave up a 7th this year and a conditional 4th next year in the 2024 draft, which the way things are looking now was probably going to be a 5th round pick. Reagor, he was our main punt returner, but other than that, he hardly ever played either. And this is a former number 1 pick. So that trade is not looking all that great for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah right now.
Well, and I put the punt stats on this slide as well as PFF grades. And if you notice on the slides of the PFF grades that don't have numbers such and such of such and such, that means they don't have enough reps percentage-wise to fall into their categorizing and ranking system. But you can see on the punt returns, which we hoped he would be very good at.
Yeah.
He only averaged 8.8 yards when he did return it. My goal is always to get minimum 9, more likely 10 or more. And he didn't quite reach that 9-yard average. He was close, but not quite. So I agree with you. He was by far not a success. Now, maybe Kevin O'Connell using him in a trick player sort of role, doing the sweeps and stuff like that. Because we know once he gets the ball, he can run rather well. It's getting the ball or the process of getting the ball, if he's trying to catch it, that he has issues with. So I agree with you there.
So the Reagor trade, getting back to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, if you look at his main free agent signings, Zadarius Smith, that was like a huge win early on in the year, particularly the first 8 or 9 games when he was being talked about as potentially a defensive NFL Defensive Player of the Year. Then after that, his play dropped off. became much quieter in his impact in the game. I felt the last 9 or so games, and he, whether that was because of injury or he was running out of gas a little bit. We know that he had a knee
Mm-hmm.
contusion that was a big problem for him, but Zadarius Smith still, I think, a good signing by Kwesi Dofamensa, but it was much better earlier in the year than it was later in the year.
Well, and you
Um,
can see how he ranked against his compadres.
yeah,
10th in pass rush. So
yeah,
even with that knee contusion and the drop off, visible drop off we saw in the second half, he did well. Now, if you look at that bottom one, it's covered up by Clifford's comment, coverage grade. He was 34th out of 49. That's not a good coverage grade. Now, you ask why coverage grade, the 3-4, your outside linebackers, your edge guys, go into coverage a lot because that's part of their definition as an outside linebacker. You go on the coverage. As I've explained it, in this style of defense, usually the weak side outside linebacker / edge is responsible for flat. If something goes around in front of his face or into the flat, he's required to drop off. You look at the other scores at his pass rushing and run stopping, and you see he's very good. Now, could he play a in the hand, dirt in the hand type of traditional defensive end, like in a 4-3 setup? No, I don't know that he can, at least not well. I would propose that he stays in the Joker role. And we've talked about that in previous podcasts, where he's available to move around wherever he feels it's possible to match up against the poorest player on the offensive side, blocking wise, and attack it that way. Whereas I think the number one graded defensive player, Daniil Hunter, of the season, is better in that traditional hand in the dirt edge role. And when looking at his grades, his coverage grades weren't great either. So, which may have led to why Ed Donatel later gets fired. But just
yeah.
just my opinion. I wanted to point that out, that the whole idea of a 3-4 and these guys in coverage may not be a smart move. Not that the 3-4 is bad, the concepts behind it, but that execution and maximizing your players' abilities to achieve improvement may be what we're looking for.
Yeah, you've got so again Smith, one of those free agent signings. A couple of the others that Kwesi Dofamensa got. Harrison Phillips. Harrison Phillips, I thought was just kind of okay. He plays a different kind of role. A plugger, run stuffer, so you may not notice him as much. But he wasn't a huge difference maker. I felt, and the Vikings weren't good. Really that great stop in the run, so some work to be done there. But Phillips is still young, and this was his first year in a new environment and a new team with a new coaching staff. So we can, I think, expect potentially this next year being him playing better than he did this past year. Jordan Hicks, the other guy, I just thought I didn't feel that he played very well all year. He looked kind of slow, particularly in pass coverage. Maybe not surprising because he's 31, but that wasn't really a great signing. I felt pretty good about Hicks when we got him, but he disappointed in the inside for me, as did Eric Kendricks. Those are and so free agent signings, a bit of a mixed bag, not a huge amount of slam dunks. And then Kwesi's first draft, we know it was very defense heavy, but none of those guys really made much of an impact. Partly a large case because of injuries, Caleb Evans with the concussions, Andrew Booth with the knee injury and the hammy before that, and of course Lewis Seen with the the fractured leg and the ankle. And really the only guy that made an impact this year was the guy you got up there, Ed Ingram at right guard, but a lot of times his impact wasn't all that great.
Right. You look at those scores, and I went and looked at Vikings players that have played guard over the last few years. And believe it or not, rookie seasons, that's second overall grade. That is second only to Ezra Cleveland.
Mm.
which surprised me. It's better than Oli Udo was. It's better than Drew Shemia. It's better than all those guys that we've had play guard. It's we know this position takes time to develop. Primary example is Garrett Bradbury. He took to his fourth year before he showed signs of life. Um, but it takes time. And did we have anybody else that could fill in, or that the coaches wanted to fill in? The obvious answer was no, or they would have. Um, and he took his lumps. There were times of wow, look at him play, right? And he knocked the snot out of some defenders. And there was other times where you just go, come on, Ed, you overset again. You had both. And we expect improvement next season from him as well. Hopefully that second year jump like Darisaw had, or even Ezra improved his second year and then greatly in his third year.
Indeed. So with Kwesi Mensa, for me, a bit of a mixed bag, up and down, and as far as the decisions and the trades he made and the free agent signings he made in his draft. Kevin O'Connell, very successful first year, but still, these guys. I overall, I feel really good about where the Vikings are. Are headed with these two. I think again the first year overall was a success to me. These two guys are young, they're driven, they're smart. I feel pretty good about where the Vikings are headed with them, especially with them taking a team, getting a division title out of a roster that I thought really the ceiling of this team was kind of 10-7 in a wild card berth. For them to go 13-4 and squeeze 13 wins out of that roster, get a divisional title, well, there's no other way but to call the season a success based on my expectations coming into the season and looking at what everybody had to work with. And like you said, looking at where the Vikings were in previous years in various aspects of the team.
I agree. And we'll finish up this segment with those two guys. They paired up. They seem to work great. They've obviously learned some lessons from last season. And we'll see how it goes moving forward. They've had to make some tough decisions, and they've made them. That's a good thing. They weren't paralyzed by it. So,
of course, the trick is always building on. You have a very successful first season, then you got to build on it, or else
constantly improve.
If you backslide, then the fans start to grumble a lot more than they did this year.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Sean says, good news, folks. Defense can only get better. Can't get worse next year. Sean, never say that. It could always get worse. We have seen it happen before. So, yes, we expect it to get better. Most likely it will. But we did finish 31st most overall. That means worse would be 32nd. So, it could get worse. Hopefully they should improve, and hopefully they will. There's a lot of things that will go into that we're going to talk about over the next few weeks. So that brings us to our first sponsor of the day. That's Badass Wood Art. Lewis making his great stuff, be it commissioned, something you want, or some of the Viking stuff. He is always there, willing to do it. Just go to badasswoodart.com. or contact him via Twitter, and you can always use the promo code CTPocket to get 20% off that piece. He does some great stuff. Thanks there, Lewis. And now, boom, boom, we move on to Theme 2. The gone part. Here we're talking about things that are gone, in particular, this man.
Viking fans won't have Ed Donatel to kick around anymore, Dave, because on Thursday, Kevin O'Connell made the decision, the right decision, to fire Ed Donatel as defensive coordinator for the Vikings. I don't think you're going to find any Vikings fan or anybody who followed the team throughout the 2022 season who would disagree with that decision.
Mm-mm.
Had to be done. Ed Donatell's defenses were just they weren't tough for opponents to play against. They didn't strike any fear in opponents. They weren't hard for opponents to figure out, as we saw. So something had to be done. Something had to change, and the first thing that you change in this case is you get rid of a defensive coordinator who didn't take this. Actually, had a unit that wasn't very good last year, very, very bad last year, and they actually even regressed.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a decision that had to be done. Can't disagree with Kevin O'Connell making this decision. And there was I saw a little bit of chatter during the week about if O'Connell doesn't make this decision, I'm going to lose faith in him. Well, he made the decision. So
He made the decision.
he made the
Now,
decision.
before we get into certain things about this, were there any players that did improve on the defensive side?
Patrick Peterson.
I would say Patrick Peterson did.
Yeah, he definitely did. If you compared to the year before,
compared to the year before, you can't count Duke Shelley because Duke Shelley wasn't with us.
No.
But that would be close to about it. I mean, the guys in the front line, they stayed about the same. They did okay, right? Whether it be Tomlinson or Phillips, but you wanted to get onto this. Whose fault was it in the Giants game?
Well, it wasn't Kirk Cousins' fault. The reason that we didn't play yesterday, or the reason we're not playing San Francisco today, and maybe is 100% defense. I believe that completely. I don't want. There was again chatter about how could Cousins throw a 3-yard pass to T.J. Hawkinson with a guy draped all over him on 4th and 8.
The check down was bad, but Kirk Cousins wasn't the one guy that let the Giants offense run for 443 yards or whatever astronomical number that was.
Nope. Kirk Cousins played a very good game, and
except for that last play, he was rocking it.
And if our defense had been able to stop the Giants more than one time, we
wouldn't have had that last play.
No, you wouldn't have had that last play. You wouldn't have had to worry about it. So, I don't think we've got a really smart group that usually tunes into our games, Dave. So I don't think anybody is blaming Cousins for that loss and hanging on.
There was quite a bit of chatter who blamed Cousins, but like I said, I don't care. You could have a great quarterback. If your defense gives up that many yards for, 9 games in the regular season and the Giants game in the postseason, you're going to have a hard time. Really, really, really hard time. And the fact that they did it 9 times in the regular season and we still came out with a 13-4 record says something.
It does. So don't want to hear anything about Cousins.
And there goes the weekly Wi-Fi shitting the bed up in Canada. What Darren was about to say, he didn't want to hear anything about it was Cousins' fault because that game, Cousins played great most of the game. As much as I have consternation over that check down pass, that it was a reversion to his old self, that check down pass shouldn't have mattered at all. And it was, if the defense had played better, got stops, we'd have never been talking about it. So, on to the next one. Oh, Ed Donatell. Why have I got Vic Fangio up there next? Oh, this is because what happened the previous year, Ed Donatell was hired because he was a Vic Fangio disciple, but he hadn't called plays in forever. But 8 of the 11 years Donatell had been defensive coordinator, his defense had been top 15 or better in points given up. That's 8 of 11. That's not bad. That's why he got hired. But how much of that was Vic Fangio in Denver in particular, or Ed Donatel, or Donatel up in Green Bay? We don't know. That's what it was. Sean Reynolds, you're envious of Philly's organization. Why is that? Now we're going to bring Darren back in. Boom. There he is. That's the weekly Northern Lights impacting your Wi-Fi.
Yeah, no, the Wi-Fi went down. Only once so far. What did I miss?
Just talking about Donatel and his record that got him hired, the 8 out of 11 years top 15 defense.
Yes.
And how it worked out. But it did not, and I was saying, well, was that Fangio or was that Donatel? Well, what was it when he was in Green Bay? Who was the one most responsible? And it may not have been Donatel. He just may have been a facilitator and possibly a good teacher or motivator. That's fine. I love the way he talked. There's some things in the way he talked to us during press conferences that sounded great. But
yes,
when you're not producing and you make statements about change and then there's no visible change. And there's no visible change until late when your coach has to call you out during the season to make changes. There's a problem. And
it was a gentle calling out. Gentle calling out.
Well, it was. It wasn't a Mike Zimmer style of call out. Mike Zimmer would have fried him. And
Zimmer was the one calling the plays, so he'd have to fry himself.
Yeah. Well, if he was, say, the offensive coordinator, he would have torched him like he did DiFilippo. It is what it is. I think Kevin O'Connell struggled with having to fire somebody. It's part of leadership, but especially when you're early in that you have to take upon yourself. I'm the guy. Mm-hmm. I hired him. He's not producing. Now I got to fire him. That's always hard because you've invested time. You've invested part of yourself. You've hoped. You've tried to help him as best you can. And it's, you get to the point where, sorry, guy, you ain't hacking it, so I got to let you go. And that's what happened. And it's tough. It's a tough move. We saw it in the press conference on Wednesday. He looked beat. He looked drained. Kwesi didn't look that bad, but Kevin did. And I think it was because they'd already probably made the decision, or about to, and they just hadn't acted upon it yet. And it takes a toll. But it's part of that learning process. It's part of that getting better. We talked about Kevin in the offense earlier about getting better for next season. It'll be the second year in the system. Well, this will be the second year of him and how to deal with his coaches and run things. Because as a head coach, it's different than, hey, you could be calling plays. You could be an offensive assistant, quarterback coach, whatever, right? You're responsible for your little bit. As a head coach, you're responsible for making all those little bits work together seamlessly. And that's not easy. It's a huge jump. On top of getting thrown with, hey, we've got this press deal. Hey, this big donor, partial owner wants to do this and that. And, the water tank burst in the facilities. Who should we get to, do it? And it's those things, why am I answering that question type deal? Go find the, lead facility manager or whatever, right? All those things hit a head coach that they don't see on their way up to that position. So I think it's good.
Yeah, there's going to be, I think, naturally there's going to be, I know amongst Viking fans, we're seeing it online and that sort of thing. There's going to be a desire now, after watching a 65-year-old Donatel's passive defenses all season bleed yards. That there's going to be I think a desire from fans to see somebody younger with a more aggressive talk and attitude, and who's got newer ideas, fresher schemes. We're starting, and all kinds of names have been coming out. A lot of them with that are linked that have either coached with O'Connell or were on coaching staffs when he played. You've got some of them up here, everywhere from Mike Pettin, who's already on the Vikings staff, by the way, to Raheem Morris, Brian Flores, who the Vikings have requested permission to interview for the DC job, Jim Leonard, the Wisconsin defensive coordinator and interim head coach, who's left that program. I know that Dave, one of the big criticism was Ed Donatel doesn't blitz enough. And I would like to see the next defensive coordinator dial up more blitzes, but blitzing all the time isn't the only way you can improve the defense.
I just want to see more interior pressure. More pressure on the quarterback. How you get there, it doesn't necessarily, you are 100% correct, it doesn't necessarily have to be through blitzes. If you've got some kick-ass guys in the middle, like we saw even last week with the Giants, or we saw last night with the Eagles, you get pressure with 3 or 4 guys if they're good enough to get that pressure. And it doesn't have to be blitzes, but the pressure is what's key. And however you get that done, as long as you're getting pressure, we're happy, because that puts the QB off his game and it gives the defense the advantage. You talked about the report that Flores has been asked to be interviewed. He's one of 3 that has popped up so far. You have Ryan Nielsen of the Saints. He's the co-DC down there. He's been asked.
Was their defensive line coach previous to that?
Previously. And he's good. You have also, this morning, Sean Desai of Seattle. He's been asked as well. Those are the 3 names that have come out so far. We will see how they're doing. Friend of the show, friend of mine, Mr. Ted Glover, is doing an in-depth little blurps on these guys, on what their winning records were, how their defenses did, yards and rankings and stuff like that, so you can get a look. You have tomorrow night's show with Tyler Fornes, the Real Forno Show. Tyler is also looking up what sort of formations, while these guys were coaches, do they play in? What are their percentages of running blitzes or doing quarter match style of coverage, or, all the different styles. So we know that we can hopefully, when the decision is made, come in and say, hey, this is this guy's tendencies. How can we see him working with what we have on defense, or what we're going to get on defense, and molding it into his vision and how that's going to help the Vikings. Wang asked, do you put Danielle Hunter as defensive tackle to generate pressure? Wang, I think as a traditional defensive end edge type, I think he's great. He's been good when he moves down into that 3 technique spot. It depends on how you're going to run the defense. And if you want to shake it up every once in a while, like Zimmer did on occasion, that helps too. It helped defeat the Saints. So he can do that. He's not your traditional inside defensive tackle, but he can do that, and the right mix and match, the little stew that you're mixing together, can make for some beautiful, beautiful things.
I think that would be a bit of a waste of Hunter's talents, though, with the way the 3-4 usually uses the defensive tackles. Though
Right.
everybody will remember when he moved, when Zimmer moved him and Griffin inside in the New Orleans playoff game, and Sean Payton talked about how that really screwed them up. They weren't expecting that. That worked because you had a 4-3, and all the defensive linemen were rushing the passer. But in a 3-4, I don't know if putting Hunter in the middle like that in the inside is such a great idea. Some things I would like to see, though, Dave, just basic things from the new defensive coordinator, whoever it is one. I'd like to see more crowding, more guys at the line of scrimmage. It seemed that we got outflanked a lot particularly on running plays. We were too light in the box, and teams really found it easy to get to the edge and run on us both inside and outside. I'd like to see our safety get put up into the box a bit more. We very rarely had a safety going up in the box to make it, again, to put a little extra fortification up front on run plays and also as a threat, as a blitzer on pass plays. And again, the other stuff is like way too much. We were way too soft in coverage, didn't jam or try to press wide receivers enough and make it harder for them to get off the line of the scrimmage. Those are some of the things I want to see a new defensive coordinator employ that we didn't see under Ed Donatel. And the other thing that I think is important is that one thing that Ed Donatel was not responsible for is that we had a pretty old defense. We had five starters on our defense who were over 30 years old or older. Peterson, Hitman, Zadarius Smith, Jordan Hicks, Eric Kendricks, all of them were 30 or over. Not many defenses do you see have that many 30 plus year olds as starters on their team. We looked, again, as we mentioned
Give me a
before,
second.
we
I
look
need to get Merlin.
slow.
You
We
keep
look
talking.
slow. We look slow. Yeah, we look slow on that many times on the defensive end of things. And that's going to have to change, Dave, I think, for the Vikings to really turn things around on the defensive side because the NFL is a young man's game. If you've got guys who are a little bit a step or two too old, or sorry, a step or two too slow, you see that in coverage. You see that in a whole bunch of aspects on the defense. And let's hope that this defensive coordinator finally really has a knack, I think, or puts a focus on tackling fundamentals because I thought that this Vikings defense was not a very poor tackling team. A lot of missed tackles in the open field. Maybe, again, part of that is because some of our inside linebackers were older. And they a lot of times we'd make first contact with a ball carrier or receiver, but they drag us 3 or 4 extra yards beyond the point of
Yeah, and it
contact.
was frustrating.
So those are some four basic things that I'd like to see the new defensive coordinator act upon and fix.
I agree. We should find out more as the week goes on. As I told Mary, the process may be slow. Remember last season we had that the collaboration group where you had Brez and a bunch of the other people in there when they went through the hiring process. They were doing that also with the DC and OC. They were going through that to help Kevin make a decision. They a lot of times they would interview people, in that first interview round, go through stuff. Do they meet the Vikings' minimum needs, desires, whatever that is for the Vikings? Do they fit the culture? Do they do this? Do they do that? They turn out and like and go, Kevin, which out of these bunch do you think will be good? And then Kevin can make that choice. Hopefully it can happen. There are plenty of lists out there of where he might, stuff of people that are attached to him in some way, some fashion,
Yes.
like Flores in New England back in the day, that we can be looking at. But it's going to be interesting to see. Freddie asked why we're half man playing zone or playing man, half playing zone. Believe it or not, you can have hybrids, Freddie, that do that, and it depends on the zone rules. The zone rule may change if a receiver does X. Then it goes, that guy in the zone then has responsibility to carry him out in a man-on situation. If it was designed that way with this half playing man and this half playing zone, that was a failure because as soon as you do that and somebody goes from zone to man and there's nobody to cover him because the other man guys are already covering their receivers, then you've got a problem. And that's what looked like happened. That's why during the play you've got to have smart enough players on the defense to be able to read it, whether they're zone, man, mixtures of rules. They've got to know that those rules are, hey, if these guys on this side are suddenly manned up and I'm in the zone on this side and my guy goes across my face, I now have to keep with him in a man type situation. I can't say, oh, he's now in the other zone. And I think that's the problem that happened last week. And it's hard to do. It's complicated defense. That's why it takes time and it takes smart people to be able to do that. And why we didn't have that this season, or why it wasn't coached well enough, is the reason I think Ed Donatel got fired. So hopefully that makes sense. Now we're on to our favorite time of the show, Lake Monster Brewing. I'm wearing the cap. You see that? On tap this week. There's nothing new, but a couple things have fallen off. No big deal. I am drinking the last of my empty rowboat. Right now, it's what you've seen me in this goblet, drinking dark, bitter IPA. Love it. It is great. I sent Matt a message that this is a damn good beer, and he replied. After this, I'll be drinking more Depth Charge regular IPA, which is a more citrusy, lighter color, because I'm out of the empty rowboat. But for you, you want a really, really good beer. Variety of chances. Go over to Lake Monster in St. Paul. It's right across the river, and try. They've got some great stuff there. Absolutely delicious. You meet good friends, have a good time, watch some of the playoff games on the big screens. You can't knock it. So have fun and enjoy your Lake Monster beer. Now on to theme 3. Boom. You wanted to talk about capitalizing on the draft.
Well, on the defensive side, Dave, it's been more not capitalizing on the draft when it comes to defensive players. But we've got a bit. We just talked in the previous segment about the Vikings defense. Ed Donatel, getting rid of him was the right move. Now we're looking for a new defensive coordinator and what we want to see, or what I want to see from the new defensive coordinator. But the other thing that, the next defensive coordinator, we're going to expect them to make a big impact on how this unit performs in 2023. And we're hoping that the defensive coordinator can have a big impact on improving it in 2023 from what we've seen. But a big reason, if you look at, to me, when I look at it, if the Vikings defense the past 3 years has not finished any higher than, when it comes to points given up, hasn't finished any higher than 24th in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And in yardage given up, it hasn't finished any higher than 27th. So this defense has been bad for 3 years now. And one of the reasons it's been bad is because we haven't been able to. We've drafted very poorly when it comes to getting defensive players in the draft. We haven't been able to get impact players, studs on the defensive side of the ball in a long time. In 2015,
this is the last time.
Yeah, in 2015, we drafted these two guys, Eric Kendricks in the second round out of UCLA and Daniil Hunter in the third round out of LSU. And they have been studs. They've been great players for us, no doubt about that. And they've been impact players. And they were able, and the fortunate thing was that the Vikings, when they drafted those two guys, we already had a core of young, outstanding to pretty good players we drafted previously on the defensive side of the ball. Harrison Smith, Everson Griffin, Brian Robeson, Anthony Barr before he started getting dinged up a lot. So those guys were already there, and so Kendricks and Hunter were able to complement that. So we had a lot of high performing defensive players that we had drafted in the early rounds. Well, since 2015, it's been pretty much zero as far as of the success we've had drafting defensive players. And that's pretty much most of that, almost 99% at this point, is all on former general manager Rick Spielman. But you look at it, Mackenzie Alexander in 2016, second rounder. He was a disappointment. Mike Hughes is in 2018, first rounder. A lot of injuries there. He was a disappointment. You'd have to say he was a bust. Jeff Gladney didn't work out as a first rounder. He was a bust for legal reasons, and then unfortunately he passed away in that car accident a little while ago. But the high picks we've chosen since 2015 on the defensive side, and granted there haven't been a lot of them, but those high picks have not worked out. And then in the mid to later rounds, the Vikings haven't gotten lucky either. Like if you look at guys like DJ Wanham, who we selected, James Lynch, Jalen Holmes, Jaleel Johnson, those guys have either been terrible players or they're just guys at this point, like James Lynch or DJ Wanham. So we're just not getting enough impact guys. And to replace, they haven't been able to step in and take significant roles and be impact players to replace guys like Harrison Smith, Eric Kendricks, and Barr, who's now gone and playing for Dallas. But as those guys got older and not quite as effective, we haven't had younger guys on the defensive side of the ball that we've drafted step in there and replace those guys and replace their level of performance when they were at their peak. And I think, and so you've either got to get free agent guys to step into their positions, or you got to use the players on your roster who aren't all that good to do that. And so far it's led to just a gradual and decline in the defensive performance. And now we're at the bottom of the barrel, and it's going to be Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's job now to draft some defensive players and really nail them and get some selections that are going to be really good players for us. The last draft, his first draft, was very high on the defensive side of the ball. 5 of the first 6 picks were defensive players, but we talked about it earlier. Brian Asamoah, Lewis Seen, Andrew Booth, injuries in a lot of cases, in some cases had impacted them, and they just didn't really make much of an impact at all on the Vikings in 2022. Maybe in 2023 it'll change, but
we hope it does in 2023.
Yeah,
we hope all three.
The returns,
these guys.
Yeah, exactly. The returns from those guys in 2022 were minimal.
But on the defensive side, yeah, it wasn't impactful. Offensive side, you had Ed Ingram. I think the most valuable non-draftee free agent was this guy, rookie.
Ryan Wright, the punter. Mm-hmm. And when a punter is your best rookie, that's usually not a great thing.
Yeah, it's not a great deal. But this man didn't help at all. And that's why we hope next year is going to be better. Better draft, better coaching.
But we need to start selecting some defensive players, guys like Micah Parsons or Patrick Surtain early in the draft, guys that come in from the get-go and really make an immediate positive impact on the defense. The Cowboys defense was pretty poor too. Now they've been building up their talent as they went along, but suddenly they get Micah Parsons last year and their defense takes a great improvement, and he really changes the Cowboys defense and the amount of pressure they're getting and the way offenses have to combat him. So one player like a Micah Parsons can make a big difference in how your defense performs. We got to also admit that Dan Quinn has done a very good job. A different defensive coordinator has done a very good job in Dallas as well.
Right.
But
with Parsons and Diggs and the whole attitude down there has changed, and our defense has gotten very good, and we're going to see it tested again tonight. So,
We are, but we have not been able to get those young players, faster players on the defensive side of the ball
Since
to impact the defense. Since Kendricks and Hunter, like imagine if Jeff Gladley had had the impact that Justin Jefferson has had on the offensive side of the ball, what a difference that would make with our defense. We need to get a Justin Jefferson on the defensive side of the ball. We need to get it soon, or this defense is going to be a long time before we climb out of that hole that we've got. Even if you get a new defensive coordinator.
Yep. Yep. I agree 100%. It's all up to this guy. Now, what's going to be different this year going into the draft versus last year? Last year, he was working with Rick Spielman's staff because they kept all the talent evaluators and stuff on to get through the draft. This year, he's had opportunities to change up that staff. I haven't heard of any, but he's had those opportunities. We assume there's some, and these are people that you're not going to hear. You're not going to see a tweet that the Vikings just released so-and-so from the scouting department, or the Vikings just hired this scout from whatever region. You're not going to hear that. Or this analytic guy. Those are things that we don't see generally in public. You'd have to scour their website if they update it. They're slow to update sometimes. But it's going to be up to this man. I'm curious about this year's draft. And we've got a limited amount of picks. Right now it's 4. We expect at least a 5th with a compensatory pick to come our way. But that's not a lot. I mean, you'd hope for a minimum 7, but he's got to work that. Now, obviously, we gave up one of those picks, sort of, for Hawkinson. We still got 2 picks back that we're going to use, but I'll take Hawkinson for the value of that pick any day of the week. So, we're going to look at how he does, and hopefully he nails it on the defense, because the defense is in dire need of hitting it right. Because when we look at the present roster right now, and this may be hard for
we get one of Dave's charts here.
Yes, Dave's charts. We see who are free agents on the right and currently on the left. There are a bunch of holes, folks, that need to be filled. We have no nickel corner as of right now. Chandon Sullivan was.
We didn't have one. We didn't have one anyway
last year. As much as I like Duke Shelley, I'd love to see him back. I'd love to see him adapt and play nickel, but he likes it on the outside. But he's a free agent. Patrick Peterson, who had probably a renaissance year. I love his smarts and how he took in the young guys and was teaching them once a week. He's a free agent. What sort of price can we get him for? But there's all sorts of holes. But if Caleb Evans and Andrew Booth Jr. step up, if Cameron Dancer figures out what in the world's bothering him and why he's so hot and cold sometimes, I mean, that'd be great. We're good at safety, though we can always improve. The big deal is corner, that backside, and then our linebackers. Jordan Hicks is old. Yes, he's under contract, but he's only going to get worse because he's old. There's regression at certain ages. You got Brian Asamoah. Look forward to seeing more of him. Eric Kendricks is under contract, but again, old, and there's possible regressions. And you have Zadarius Smith, who's great at rushing the pass, but not in coverage. Danielle Hunter, great at rushing the pass, but not at coverage. And will the middle guys, Harrison Phillips, etc., step up? Is Dalvin Tomlinson, who's a free agent, going to be allowed to walk? Are they going to make a move to keep Kyrus Tonga, which should be relatively easy because he's a exclusive rights free agent? It's these things have to be filled. So as much as we may want to go, let's get another outstanding wide receiver to pair up with Justin Jefferson in there, and make that offense absolutely superb, you still got to fill a lot of those holes on defense. So you got to figure out the best way to do it, where you get the most value. Is it the first round? And as I've told people online, you don't give up First rounders are for premium picks, premium positions, generally, and that is corner on a defense, that is defensive edge on the defense. On offense, it's your quarterback, obviously, and wide receivers and left tackles. It's beyond that. You're overpaying unless you identify that one guy that absolutely stands out and can be above the rest. And where we're drafting in the 23rd pick, we're the 24th position, but we're picking 23rd because of the cheating by the Dolphins. At that position, you can get a very good player that can usually start, whether it's on the defensive side, start and contribute, or if they go for that wide receiver to pair up with Jefferson, we don't know yet. This could be fun to watch. There's arguments both ways. But you got to remember, rookies are rookies, and there are very, very few of them that make a difference their rookie year. They may start and be adequate. Ed Ingram was adequate. He wasn't great. He wasn't too terrible. He didn't lose his job. He was good enough to keep his job, and he's good enough to beat out some vets. But that's the majority of rookies. Even first rounders fall into that category. It's only a handful that will make an impact. And it's up to that man on the screen. Can he find those at the position we're picking, or move to a position to pick them, so that the Vikings can improve next season? Agreed?
Agreed. And then some.
Hold on a second. Got a call. I'm still doing my show. Can I call you back?
Want fast food?
What?
Do you want fast food?
Do I want fast food? Sure. Get me. You know what I like. Bye. Sorry about that. Daughter's out there wondering what kind of fast food. But do you agree? It's going to be up to what Kwesi does, not only in the draft, but also in free agency, how to fill those holes.
Yeah, we'll be getting into it as the offseason goes, but there's all kinds of things in play. The Vikings cap position, which is not great, but they'll get that sorted out so that they can be players to some degree, just like they were last offseason. And then in the draft, I'm glad you mentioned about what new scouts and scouting staff he'd be having to help in the draft, because yes, we assume that there's been some changes made there because he had Rick Spielman's old staff who I would think wouldn't have the same, like they wouldn't be handpicked by Kwesi, and so that might have impacted the kind of draft he had and the data he was using to make those picks as well. So if he's made some changes to that, and we imagine that he has, this draft might look, and the players he picks might look a bit different than the last draft, and hopefully the performance of those draft picks will be much different as well. And by that I mean they perform much better and actually get to play a bit.
Yeah, we hope so. We hope so. Well, that brings us to the final part, and since you log back in, I got to reload your image here. Bada boom, bada bing. It's going to be fun, and we're going to talk about it. Going to be fun. And Clifford, you are right. The front offices have to start planning 2, 3, 4 years ahead. And, and they hope everybody hits, but they have to have backup plans when somebody gets hurt, and et cetera. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do it. Davey, yes. Would I love Jalen Carter? Absolutely. He'd be great in the middle. Are we going to be able to trade up for individual that might go first in the draft, or at least top 10? It's going to be hard to see. So, Dad, how much whiskey should I get? Enough to get, first off, get whiskey that you enjoy, enough to give you that where you like to be, the buzz level you like to be, and enough to maintain it. Do not go over that level. It's unnecessary and a waste. GMAC asks, do we think they will extend Kirk Cousins? This is a big question across the internet this week.
Of course it is. And I would, the way they've been handling Dave, the way they've been handling it. This is with like pre Kwesi anyway. So uh, it's and even last year, but it has been to extend him to push the pain out of that big salary to future years. And I think with the way that the team performed last year. Uh, and the way Cousins performed with the new attitude and then taking more chances and how that all turned out, that I think that I'm expecting that they will try to extend him again another couple of years and lessen that cap hit this year. Um, Cousins has to agree to that, mind you.
It's a
And another
35 million,
important,
I think, this year is what
yeah,
he's got.
yeah. I think the other and one thing that might impact their decisions on this is what Justin Jefferson thinks about it. Um,
That's part of it. And
Are you
Mary,
going to get? Are you going to get? If you're looking to sign Justin Jefferson to an extension, I'm thinking that he's going to want to sign with a team where he'll be comfortable what the quarterback situation is going to be
right, and that's going to
during
throw him
some
the
of those
ball. I heard
years.
there was rumblings
Yeah.
he was a little upset that the ball wasn't thrown his way on that 4th and 8 uh, deal at the end of the game, the Giants game. And you can't blame him because he had earned the trust. You should just throw it my way. I'll catch it. I don't care how many people are guarding me. I'll catch it. And he's going to play a big part in that. But the question of whether to extend Kirk Cousins, he is 35 years old, or going to be 35
Yes.
years old for the season. 35 is generally the age when quarterbacks go and fall off the cliff. There are exceptions. Tom Brady is way an exception, right? Aaron Rodgers is an exception. But most of them hit that 35 range and start to fall apart. And that's not where you go with it. There's the cost. Obviously, he's under contract for next year. He has a no trade clause that he would have to opt to waive if we wanted to go that route. You have options. You can say, yes, we want to extend you 1 or 2 more years. You can say, hey, we want to go 4 years and then get burned if he falls off that age cliff next year. And we saw some signs of that. I mean, his stats were lower. His mentality was better, but his stats were lower. Or do you say, play it out? My choice would be to bring him in and say, hey, say we want to talk extension, but first we're going to let you play it out this year before we make a decision. And then we want to go. We want you to play for it and to see how well you do. And if he doesn't like that because he doesn't like playing in a last year of a contract, then say, well, if you don't like playing for it, give us permission to trade you. There are different ways to do it, but I don't think Cousins is the long-term answer. There are signs that there's things he got a lot better at that I appreciated, respect him for this year, like I didn't in previous years. The taking the hits, the getting the fourth quarter comebacks. But I don't see him physically getting that much better or lasting that much longer. And you're still going to come to the time, even with him, that you're looking at when Justin Jefferson hits his prime. Folks, you got to remember, Justin still hasn't entered his prime yet. That are you going to be changing quarterbacks then? So it's a quandary. I wouldn't extend him right now. I'd tell him to play it out. But that's Dave's personal opinion. GMAC thinks Cousins is top guy. We may have gotten the best Cousins we can get. So it's unfortunately not up to us. It's going to be up to Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell.
Well, if you're gonna let Cousins play it out, and that would be my preference to be as well, because at some point, like you say, you have to have like the future. Like what's the succession plan to Cousins? Because at 35, like you say, even if you get 2 or 3 extra years out of him, you've got to come to that point at some
Right.
and it's going to get here pretty quickly, and so that is I'd prefer that he played it out. But in order to do that for next year, you've got to the Vikings would have to they'd have to have their succession plan started as of this draft, and I don't know where that comes from.
Or at least have it in place for the next one.
Yeah,
For
there's some
2024. And
there's some quarterbacks.
There's supposedly a better quarterback crop in 2024 than there is in 2023.
Well, yeah,
but we hear that almost every year.
Every year, there's some guys that are going to be out in the open market this year. Gardner Minshew, even Jimmy Garoppolo, where you'd be kind of like,
Garoppolo's going to be out.
Those could be. I don't know.
Brock
Bridge.
Purdy,
Hey.
Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy continues to win, and say he gets the Niners to the Super Bowl. The Niners have a choice. They spent all that money on Trey Lance, or all those picks on Trey Lance. But if Brock Purdy goes out there and wins them a Super Bowl, you now have a problem in San Francisco. Because who do you keep? Your Super Bowl winning quarterback, or you go back to Trey Lance, who was injured and only has potential. It's going to be interesting. I'd love to trade for Trey Lance to the Vikings, but I don't think that's going to happen. But, just one of those dream things. It all depends. It's fluid. And we'll see as it goes down, and we'll talk about it much more between now and then.
The one thing that can be sure is it's not whatever decision they make is not going to be. It's one that it's not an easy decision to make, because there's pros and cons to both. But yeah, I hope that if Kwesi Dovamensa is into analytics as much as he is, he must know the history of quarterbacks at the age and when they start to really go down the tubes and not play near the level they once did, as we saw with Matt Ryan this year. If you want to know what Kirk Cousins could be when he's 37, look at Matt Ryan now. I don't think the Vikings want that as their starting quarterback 2 or 3 years' time.
Well, and Chuck says Vikings never take enough swings at quarterbacks to find that home run one. I agree with you, Chuck. I think they should take one at least every other year, just for development purposes. And if they develop and they're well, but you still got your starter guy, then you got great trade value, like New England trading Garoppolo. It's a proven method that works, but they have not done it because we've had other needs like cornerback on the defensive side because they've not lived up to potential. And so, Clifford, Trey Lance has played 1 year. Clifford, I said potential. He's got potential. I didn't say he's proven. Not even close. But anyways. With that, any last words there, buddy?
No, we're just going to watch some football this afternoon and dream about what the Vikings could have been there and what they need to do to be there in 2023.
Well, that's the night game. The afternoon game is going to be fun in itself. You have the Cincinnati going up to Buffalo. And then who wins that depends on where the championship's going to be played. Because if Cincinnati wins, then it's in Atlanta, the neutral field site, and Kansas City will go there. If Buffalo wins, then it's in Kansas City, if I've got that right. No, or maybe one of the way, opposite one of the others. But it's going to be interesting to see. And then, of course, Dallas and San Francisco, which we do not have to like either team. I do not. Just by what they've done to us in the past, I despise Dallas more than I do San Francisco, but both of them have bad memories. So, but we hope it's a good game and fun game to watch, unlike last night's game.
I think it'll be a good one.
And Davey says, fix the Wi-Fi towers with the dew line. Do you know what the dew line is?
I sure do. Just an early warning line.
Aha.
Only went out once today. So.
Uh-huh. That's all you can hear. I think Katie's home because Merlin's barking. With that, what do we say, buddy?
We say, Skol Vikings!
Skol Vikings! Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite aggregator. And a special shout out goes to our partners, the Daily Norseman, where the best Vikings content can be found, and to Lake Monster Brewing, home of the best beer in Minnesota. Skol, everybody.